In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the idea of dominant impression and also talk to you about the idea of showing versus telling. And we're going to use this profile essay called June in order to look for those qualities. And so I'm going to go through first with showing versus telling, and then we'll talk about the overall dominant impression we get. So the idea of showing versus telling is that you use descriptive details and or dialogue and or the thoughts or feelings you have about the individual you're interviewing, their actions and body language, and you use these items to try to give us a strong impression of what the person is like without actually just saying what the person is like. And so we're not going to say June had a hard life. We're actually going to give examples of that. We're not going to say that June is a kind person. We're going to show that through the word choices she uses and through the descriptions we have of this person. So let's take a look for showing details as we go through. And just to provide you a little bit of context, Mary Pfeiffer is a psychologist, but also a creative writer. And she has a whole series of essays, June is one of them, that she did to kind of create impressions of women that she had met during her work as a therapist. The morning we met, June had worked a double shift at the Kawasaki plant, gone out for breakfast, and driven across town to my office. June was big-boned with a round, pockmarked face. She wore her hair short and was dressed in a gray sweatsuit. She lumbered into my office and sank into the couch. She was so physically imposing that I was surprised by her delicate sensibilities. And so here, in this first paragraph, we have a lot of description. So big-boned, round pockmarked face, short hair, gray sweatsuit. She seems like a big, burly woman, not a particularly attractive woman. And so I get a strong impression of what she looks like. But you see that, they didn't have a lot of varies, or we didn't have to learn her height or really specific details like that. The idea of lumbering, physically imposing, those short descriptive terms actually gave me a lot more of an impression of her than if I, said exactly that she's 5 foot or 6 foot tall and weighs this much. Her language was personal and precise and earthy. She talked about herself softly and carefully, as if psychotherapy like dentistry might hurt. She did not, thank goodness, talk like someone who had read too many self-help books. June said, "I'm here because I'm dating someone for the first time in my life. I'm 27. I've never been kissed. I thought that I might need some coaching." And so here we get a first bit of dialogue, and we learn a little bit about her life, and we let her tell her life instead of just summarizing it ourselves if we have interviewees. She had been at the Kawasaki for 10 years. Her closest friend worked next to her on the assembly line. Dixie was a single parent, and June helped her with her kids. She pulled out their school pictures and showed me and said they called her Aunt June. They're real good kids, she said, once you get to know them. And so in this paragraph, the author takes responsibility for summarizing some of the details so that the interviewee doesn't have to tell his or her whole story, but we learn more about her, and we learn this through example, that she is a friend, a good friend, and helps with kids and enjoys kids enough that they call her Aunt June. June met her boyfriend Marty at work too. He was the union representative for her group of workers. The last 3 Saturday nights, he had dropped by with pizza and a video. Last Saturday night, he put his arm around June. That's when she decided to call me. I asked her about her family, and June sighed. I was afraid you would bring them up. And here, this is very telling. Just the word sighed instead of said gives us a sense of the tone and the attitude that she has. We can wait, I say gently. I might as well get it out, she said. After you hear about my teenage years, you'll understand why I haven't dated much. It sets up a little bit of suspense using this particular quote out of the interview. June's father was a farm laborer who never had much to do with me. Her mother was a cook at a rest home. She was hardworking and fun. She'd bring me treats from the rest home, cookies and crafts that the residents made for me. She showed them my picture and kept them posted on my activities. Everyone at the home loved her. June paused and looked at me. Mom died at the start of my freshman year of high school. It was an awful time to lose her, and I had just started my period. I was clumsy and had bad acne. I had been slightly chubby, and then I got fat. I was totally alone. And so we get a bit of her history in her own words, and you see that we indent paragraphs when different people are talking in a conversation. We also indent paragraphs when topics change. So June's father and her mother is a description, and then her mother dying is a new thing in a new paragraph. June blew her nose before continuing. Good little detail here to indicate that she's crying or near crying as she tells this story. The year Mom died, I watched the Miss America pageant all by myself. I stared at those thin, poised girls and knew I would never be like that. I had no looks and no talents. Only my mom loved me as I was. I thought about giving up. She rubbed her forehead as if to erase some memories too painful to consider. I don't know how I made it through that year. Dad was never home. I had hardly any clothes. I did what housework and cooking got done, and that was precious little. Dad almost never gave me money for groceries. I was fat and hungry at the same time. And so I like that, the rubbing the head as if to erase memories. That's a really powerful metaphor that they give there. And good to use that kind of body language to indicate a little bit more about what this person is like. I asked her, and notice that the interviewee doesn't say, I asked her, and then put a question in there. The interviewee just introduces the dialogue by saying, I asked her about the kids at school, and then lets her reply. So we don't have a whole lot of Q&A sort of formatting going on. They were terrible. Not so much mean as totally indifferent. I didn't exist for them. I was too ugly and too sad to even be a part of the class. I ate by myself and walked to and from school alone. No one would be my lab partner. She rubbed her big face and continued. One time a boy approached me in the cafeteria in front of all of the other kids and asked me to go to a football game. I was such a goof that I thought he meant it. I thought maybe he could see past my appearance and like the real me. So I said sure, if I could get Dad's permission. Then he started laughing. His buddies all whooped it up too. They dared him to do it for a joke. He collected $10 just for asking me out. And so here we have her words, but also a powerful example of some of the things that she's been through, the obstacles that she's overcome. June sighed. After that, I steered clear of boys. Her father married Mercine a year after June's mother died. They took a honeymoon trip to Sun City and bought June salt and pepper shakers for her hope chest. By then, I had no hope, she said flatly. And flatly is kind of an expression of that she doesn't have a lot of emotion in her voice, and so this is also very descriptive, even though it doesn't take very many words. My stepmother was tight with money. She only let me wash my hair once a week. I needed to wash it daily because it was so greasy, but she didn't want to pay for the water. My teeth were crooked, and the school recommended braces. Mercine said, I've heard that can cost thousands of dollars. No way we'll spend that kind of money for straight teeth. Once I cut my foot pretty badly when I was walking beans. She wouldn't pay for the doctor. I limped a little because of that. I worked hard to remain neutral, and so this is the author coming back in, as June talked about this neglect. June herself had no anger. She continued matter-of-factly. I was the black sheep. Once my stepbrother asked me why I lived with his family. And so here we have, and you'll want to do this in your essays too, a little bit of the author's own interpretation. The author gets in there and tells you how to see things, that she's angry at June's neglect, but June herself is not angry. So she's interpreting the situation for us. I asked her how she survived all those years when she was rejected at home and at school. I thought about my mother and how she would have wanted me to behave. I decided that other people's bad behavior was no excuse for mine. I would do the best I could. I talked to Mom in bed at night. I told her about my days. I always tried to have something I was proud of to report to her. I knew she really loved me, and that got me through a lot. I knew I was lovable and that people around me were too blind to see it. So here we have kind of the transformational moment that even though her mother's passed away, that she has a relationship with her still, and she tries to live up to what she thinks would make her mother proud. And so this was a really powerful moment, and the writer put it in June's words to really bring it across more powerfully. June rubbed her broad face with a handkerchief. At times, I desperately wanted friends. Now, I think I learned a lot those years. I learned how to take care of myself. I got so other people's rejection didn't faze me. I had ideas about right and wrong. After high school, my life really improved. I started working at Kawasaki. Immediately, I felt more accepted. I worked hard and people noticed. Women invited me to eat with them. The men joked around with me. My supervisor took an interest in me. He encouraged me to get my teeth worked on and to have my foot evaluated. I wear a brace now that's corrected my limp. June smiled when she spoke of work, and so here we get kind of an attitude shift. And again, it doesn't take a lot of words, it's just choosing those verbs that really show her body language, and that communicates a lot about how the person is feeling and what the person is like. I have a Halloween party every year for all the workers in my area. Fridays, I bowl on the union team. I have earned merit raises every year I've worked there. I make good money. So here it's June's words again, but these are examples of all the positive things that are going on with her, both socially and her as a worker. I've forgiven Dad and Racine. I'm happy. So what is there to be angry about now? I'm happier than they are. I try to do something for them every weekend. I take a pie over or mow their yard. So here we have a person who's not resentful and recognizing why, that she's happy and they're not. And so there's no reason to kind of dig up the old stuff. I asked her how she gets along with her father. Dad can't forgive me for being fat. He really wanted a beautiful daughter. I thought of June's life, and so here again the author is going to be offering some interpretation, some explanation in her own words to give you a sense of what she wants you to get about June. And so you'll do the same thing in your essays. You're going to interpret this person whom we haven't met, so we get the characteristics you want to communicate. I thought of June's life. She had a spirit as delicate and strong as a spider web. She is gifted at forgiving and loving. Because she is utterly unattractive by her cultural standards, she has been devalued by many, including her own father. But somehow she has managed to survive and even thrive through all this adversity. She reminds me of one of those succulent desert flowers that remain dormant for so many seasons and then bloom lavishly when there's a smattering of rain. And so she has some really lovely metaphors here, and that might be something you want to introduce too. This idea of being delicate and strong as a spider's web, so that's a comparison. And then she has this idea that a metaphor about June being a succulent desert flower. So when there's just the little lightest bit of nourishment, of rain, then she just blooms under those conditions. I said to her, your father has missed an opportunity to love someone who is marvelous. We talked about Marty. That's her boyfriend. He's a bulky man who is prematurely balding. June said, his looks don't matter. I know how hard he works, and that he doesn't put anyone down. He's not a complainer. I suggested that daily she imagine herself successfully kissing him. It's hard to do when you can't what you can't imagine doing. Once you have the images down, the reality becomes easier. I encouraged her to keep her expectations for a first kiss low. Bells may not ring, the sky may not light up. I quoted Georgia O'Keeffe, totally out of context. Nobody's good at the beginning. And so here she actually brings in a second source, which you're going to want to do too. Whether it's another opinion on the person, another interview about the person that you're interviewing, focusing on, or whether it is some passage that you read, like in this case, that helps reinforce the characteristic that you're trying to bring across. I pointed out that the relationship was going well. Physical affection was only a small part of a relationship. She was already gifted at loving and forgiving, which were much more important qualities. I predicted that kissing would be easy once she was ready. When I saw June again, she reported that kissing was great. She asked if I thought she needed more therapy. No, I said, I think you could teach me some lessons about strength through adversity and the importance of forgiveness. So here the author brought in her own words, her own quote, but really for emphasis. And so there's not a lot of her asking questions. It's mostly her interpreting and letting June do the talking when talking is going to be done. June is a good example of someone who, with almost no luck at all, fashioned a good life for herself. Almost all of our psychological theories would predict that June would turn out badly. But, as happens more frequently than psychologists generally acknowledge, adversity built her character. And so here's an important theme. What saved her was her deep awareness of her mother's love. Even though her mother was dead, June felt her mother's spirit was with her, and that enabled her to feel valued at a time when she was rejected by everyone. June's belief in her mother's love gave her a sense of purpose. She was determined to live in a way that would make her mother proud. So here's all explanation, and that's really common to have a lot of explanation at the end of a profile essay because you've been presenting, showing pictures of this person through examples, through their words, through description, and now you want to make sure that everyone's interpreting this person's character the way you had hoped. Her conclusion, June had the gift for appreciating what was good in life. Once she told me, I always get what I want. Then she winked and said, but I know what to want. Her life, which may strike some people as difficult or dull, is rich and rewarding. She has friends, money, a boyfriend, and the respect of her peers. She has no bitterness or anger because she's basically happy. She's a desert flower opening in the rain. So she ends with this same metaphor that she introduced earlier. And so what we have here is a really well put together, this is a professional author, a really well put together profile, but you see how the author balances description and interview quotes and explanation and brings them all together, examples, in order to create a strong impression. And so the dominant impression I get from June, or I get a few major impressions. She seems to be a good person who's remained good despite all the obstacles she faced. And so she's basically someone who has found happiness, and she kind of made her own happiness along the way. She's a satisfied person. So you want to make sure that whoever you're interviewing, that you're using your interview quotes in a way that brings out not just the obstacles, so we saw June's obstacles, but the character of this person. So we don't want this to be just a tragedy of terrible things. We want to see the good that resulted, or the good character that this person has despite the things that they've been dealing with. Or, June also had dreams that she lived up to. So you could also present this as kind of a achieving the dream sort of thing.